Hello, I am James Woodcock and welcome to episode 2 of James and Tony's Bits and Bobs podcast, where we discuss all things gaming, gadgets and technology. This is basically a nice conversation without the fluff of mass editing, intro tracks and so on. In fact, the only scripted bit is this introduction. So nice to speak to you again, Tony.
Hello there, how you doing?
I'm very well, considering the interesting circumstances we find ourselves in.
Yeah, how's the lockdown going?
Well, thankfully, back to my freelancing days, I'm quite accustomed to working from home and not venturing to the great outdoors that often. So, it's not too big of an adjustment for me. And you've been working from home for quite some time as well. So I think you're probably quite settled as well.
It's like the same, really. Everyone else is freaking out. We're going to survive this. It's just normal. The only difference is you can't go to the pub in the evening afterwards. That's a big problem. Apart from that, it's all right.
Well, wait till we see what my next guest has to tell us. So with us today is an extra individual who has snuck on, who has been kind enough to join us. Well known for his work with Sumo Digital and Sega. Welcome to the show, Steve Lycett.
Hello. Nice to meet you all.
Who's in the best position of us all because he's literally sat in front of his beer fridge.
So yes, I am slowly getting used to working from home. This is not something which is usual for me, so you guys have obviously got a lot more experience. So now I'm finding it interesting because it's quite a challenge to get dressed every morning, is one of the things I'm finding. And it's also a challenge not to just sit and drink beer all day. But I'm managing to resist.
Yeah.
Wow. How do we follow on from that,
Trick is to go out for your little walk that you're allowed. And then it's best to get dressed for that.
Yeah, I will get dressed like a grown-up slightly later on today, I think.
No.
Well, cut the grass. Can't cut the grass in my pajamas. I should add, I am clothed, just not in my workwear.
Yes, because we're actually seeing each other with video here just so we can sort of interact better with each other, but we're just recording the audio. So I'm very grateful that Steve is indeed dressed for this occasion. So, Tony, I believe you have a ZX Spectrum next.
I was going to say that's about the only interesting thing that's happened recently. Yeah, I do indeed. It's sat right next to me, and a very nice thing it is too. It's very, you see the Kickstarter and you go, oh, that looks good. It should be a laugh. We'll give it a go and see what happens. And many years have passed since that, but the thing comes through the post, and it really is quite impressive. It's super professional. The whole thing. It's just like. You wouldn't think it was a little Kickstarter that some guys had put together. It looks like something that's come from a big league manufacturer. In many ways, the box and stuff is better than the originals. Because it's tough and solid, and the manual's lovely, and it's way above expectation. Yeah.
So, did you have the original ZX Spectrum in the day?
You know what? I didn't. I first saw ZX81s and I thought I'll have one of those, and then started saving up, and then people started getting Spectrums, and obviously we all knew about Spectrums, but I went a different way. I got a strange thing called a Computer's Lynx, which was an alternative sort of thing was around at the time. I figured it was better for programming on, so I got one of those instead of a Spectrum. But later when I started working, I was working on Spectrums, and I got one then, but I wasn't in right at the beginning.
Wow. So which one of the next have you gone for? Have you gone for the stock one, or have you gone the accelerated one? Or
I got the middle one, the one with Wi-Fi.
Oh, cool.
I couldn't understand what the accelerated thing was actually going to do for me, so I thought I'd go the slightly not the cheapest, but not the
most expensive.
Most expensive either. No, I haven't actually got the Wi-Fi working yet on it, so I still don't really know what that does, but it looks good. I think you can connect it to some sort of bulletin board thing, can't you? I think I've seen people doing that, so if I can figure out how to do that, I'll give it a go.
This sounds like a wonderfully geeky thing to do, indeed.
Well, connecting to a BBS with a Spectrum, it's pretty hardcore, is that?
It's pretty hardcore, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine because again I ordered it, and I've watched the trials and tribulations of it coming out, and the difference for me is that I've watched them desperately try and make it better all the way through. They've looked at making sure it supports different Spectrum clones. They made sure it's, the keyboard is absolute top quality. And I'm really excited for it, but I have no idea when it's coming. So it might even be in the office right now.
It should be, yeah. A lot of people have got the accelerated this week, so it won't be far off if it's not there already.
Hope, fingers crossed, it's not going to be too long.
I think they've gone out, so yeah. I mean, it must be super frustrating to have to wait. You've got the best one, and they delivered them last, and there's a good 2 or 3 weeks, wasn't there, between that one and the middle one? So yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
I feel your pain.
So I know for me, I'll set it up and I'll probably play Manic Miner, and that'll be the first thing I do. So
yeah,
and then maybe
everyone does.
We'll see.
Like, set it up, play some old games, and then have a think about what you're really going to do on it.
So did you have one back in the day, Steve? Oh
God, yeah. So my dad was always into computers. So the first thing he got was he built he used to buy electronics magazines, I should say. So he built his first version of Pong. He got some chips from somewhere and some potentiometers and put this thing together. And so we'd always had computers as kids. And I remember he bought the ZX81 and he built that from a kit as well, because you could buy it in kit form. And the Spectrum was the next step on from there. So I've always had computers around as a kid, and he was really into it. And that's kind of, guess, how I got into it. So yeah, but Spectrum, definitely Spectrum. They're not the Commodore things. Tell the Amiga.
So, Tony, if you didn't have one back in the day, what was it about this particular version that went, I've got to have this?
Well, I mean, I didn't have one back in the day because I kind of skipped and went this alternate route. But I'm still a big Sinclair fan, So, I mean, I've got them now. I've got like a really nice boxed Spectrum 48 and a boxed ZX81 and all this sort of thing. So I'm looking for a QL, in a good condition box. So I'm kind of a collector now, and I kind of see the Sinclair thing as being pivotal and important and sort of a big cultural, big cultural importance, So the next just seemed like the thing to do as just part of that experience, And I like the idea of having maybe doing some programming on it. I need to figure out how to do it. Because, a lot of people they're just getting the machine and coding on it, and to me that seems a little bit like hard work, really. I kind of want to, because when we were programming Spectrum games, we used a system called PDS where you had a PC compatible, and it all, you had your assembler on that, and you press a button and it would shoot the thing down a wire, and the Spectrum would run it. And it was the best dev system I've ever used, to be honest, even now. So I kind of want to do the same thing, and I don't know if you can do it. I assume you can, but I haven't figured it out yet. There must be a way.
Yeah, I know my friend, he's got his, and he's been looking at it, and I think he's got a cross compiler. So I don't know how he's squirting it down, whether he's doing it over Wi-Fi or serial.
Yeah,
but no, you can do it.
I think you must be able to do it. Yeah, so I need to figure that out. When everything calms down and I've got 5 minutes, I'll figure out how to do it, and then we're away, aren't we? Then we can do something interesting.
And have you got anything in mind of what you'd like to do that would be considered interesting for Tony?
That's going to be the problem. What I tend to do is I think, here's a nice idea, and then I build on it, and it grows out of control, and then it's like, oh well, it looks like a bit much work. I'll just put it by for 5 minutes and think about it, and then it never happens, So it's a case of thinking up something realistic. I don't know. Maybe I could pick one of my old games and see if I can kind of do an enhanced version, something like that. Yeah. Maybe Deathstalker, although I don't have the rights anymore. I sold them to Codemasters. Maybe I should write to Codemasters and say, please give me the rights back.
I think you should. If this is something that's going to take you 5 minutes to do, though, if you're going to spend the next 10 years redeveloping this game, maybe it's not the one project for you, Tony.
Yeah, that's the danger with it. It gets carried away. So, I don't think there's any commercial worth in it either. So it'd be foolish to put too much effort into it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's quite a few games which are coming out and people are charging £5 or £10 for them. You're never going to get rich off the back of it, but there seems to be some kind of market there.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, I think I'd be bit more enthusiastic. If it kind of went into a, if they did the second Kickstarter and then they said, wow, this is really a thing, and they just started making them, and you could buy them on Amazon. Because I think they could do that. I mean, I think it's a legitimate product, and they should just start manufacturing them and selling them all the time, And then I think it would be something you could really, really put your head down and think about trying to be part of how that ecosystem builds, If that makes sense.
It does indeed. Well, for the last few weeks, my enhanced soundtracks I've put through WooCommerce, so I'm not charging for them still. They're completely free, but it means I can see actually how many are being downloaded each day and with which titles. It just gives me a bit more visibility of what's happening. And I was quite surprised how many people were downloading the soundtracks, and it's a bit of a toss-up at the minute between Discworld and Beneath a Steel Sky of which one's actually getting the most downloads out of the 6 I've got currently available. But if that's anything to go by, and from the retro events I've been going to and the YouTube videos I see online where they're repairing old machines and bringing new life into them, it seems to be changing capacitors and replacing batteries is always the point of order with these things. But there seems to be a real interest in retro nostalgia, probably more now than I've seen in a long time, if not ever. And there's always been that nostalgic bent where we'll buy some remastered edition or some sequel release and we'll delve into it hoping to relive some of what we see as the glory days. But I think now more than ever, even people who didn't see it the first time round are going, oh, this pixel art stuff and these inventive, I can actually see where sort of modern games have got a lot of the inspirations from. I want to try this. And they generally seem to be enjoying it. And I think certainly now more than ever, this is the time to, if you're going to do a remaster or a sequel based on these things, is a very good time to do it. As long as obviously the heart and soul goes into the project and it's just not a money spinner.
Yeah. I think you're right about retro, really, and that feeds back into the point I was trying to make with the next. Rather than seeing it as just a curiosity made for people that are hardcore fans of the first one, it's legitimate in its own right, and it'd be good to see that whole retro scene become just a scene. It just exists for because it's legitimate.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, I'm laughing because I bought a PC Engine Mini. that didn't end well. But again, it was the fact that I've got an original one upstairs, but nice. I'm scared of plugging it in just in case the thing bursts into flames or the capacitors have died or whatever it turns out to be. And I think there's a real market for that stuff at the minute because it's a modern piece of hardware that will let you play those older games and plug it to a modern TV, and you don't have to worry about stuff dying or burning out. Although, having said that, I got it and the controller doesn't work. So
oh no,
got to go back to Japan. But yeah, you see it, and the minis are coming out, and the next I think is really useful and interesting because at least that's a machine you can develop on versus something like the SNES Mini or the PC Engine Mini where you're kind of locked into the games which were available kind of back then, and it feels like there's an interest there in the market there for people to kind of make new stuff and put it out there. So yeah, it's interesting to see where it goes.
It's a good contrast to all this AAA stuff, isn't it?
Well, totally. I mean, that's kind of what I do day in, day out working for Sumo. And it, when it gets to a certain scale, I don't want to say the creativity kind of falls out, but you have to just be that little bit safer in terms of what it is you're making and what you're doing. And it is driven by, executives and people are going like, is this definitely going to make a return and make sure it's super safe? Whereas on the older stuff, people could be a little bit more avant-garde and just come up with something which is like way, way out there. I always find that interesting. I play as many indie games as I do kind of commercial releases just because of that interesting qualities that you get from an indie game.
It was very experimental back in the day, wasn't it? You'd buy your copy of Crash and you could get a big surprise. Someone might have done something that you'd not seen before. That was the excitement, I think.
Oh, totally. I mean, still one of the formative games I always remember is Deus Ex Machina, which was kind of like a concept album, the best way to describe it, with a soundtrack and just a random set of cutscenes attached to it, and you played the way through it. And you look now, you think, I can't imagine anything which is kind of like that these days.
Is that the Pie Man thing?
Yeah, it was a Mel Croucher kind of thing. Just totally bonkers. You know, he got a soundtrack with like Ian Drury on it and John Pertwee's the narrator. And look it up if you've never seen it. It's properly out there.
Yeah, I remember all that. They used to take an advert on the back, I think, of Personal Computer News, was it? Every week? Something like that. There was always an advert by those guys. And I remember the last one ever, and it was because it was a cartoon, wasn't it? The adverts were like cartoon form. Yeah,
it was the Pie Man, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the last one ever it was a little lad and saying to his daddy, who was the Pie Man.
So
I remember it so distinctly.
So how does this work then? We've got all this power in next generation systems. We're getting a purported 12 teraflops coming around the corner as well. And yet back in the day when we had limited memory and limited capabilities, this was probably the period where we were pushing new boundaries and being more experimental. How do you think that is? Is it purely commercial or do you think there's more behind it?
For me, it's kind of hard to say. I look at the new consoles, and while it's exciting that we're going to get all this new power and stuff, they are effectively new PCs, as much as I hate to say it.
Yeah.
And we've had lots of power in gaming systems beforehand. And like I say, you've got to find someone who's you're willing to work with, or is willing to work with you, and come up with something which is a little bit out of the ordinary. I look at it like music. Music's now become very much a package thing. You know what you're kind of getting. Especially commercial music, it's very safe, and a lot of commercial games to me feel very kind of safe, which is why I particularly at the moment, I like to look at indie stuff, because the indie stuff is where it's a little bit, you can be a bit more avant-garde and be a bit more interested in that kind of play.
A bit like being in a band, wasn't it? Right, and you get together with your mates and say, let's write a game. And someone was good at graphics, and someone was good at sound, someone was good at programming, and you'd just come up with something crazy, based on what you wanted to play. And you didn't really have to worry about the commercial side of it. If it was good, one of the publishers would take it, and you'd do all right.
Completely.
Maybe this scene, this retro scene, is going to grow up, and it's going to be. And if it is legitimate and it is self-sustaining, then it could be the source of where new ideas are really going to come from again.
Well, I like to see that personally. It's get something which is a little bit out there and a bit more unusual.
So to bring some kudos back to the modern, then I know something you've been trying, Steve, is Half-Life Alyx.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay, so when we're talking about sort of next gen, this is probably as next gen PC as you can get right now.
Yeah, that's... So it's kind of interesting, Half-Life Alyx, in so much as I really enjoyed it, and I have finished it now. I won't ruin the ending, don't worry. And what's brilliant about that, there's almost like a restraint to it. They've chosen to do certain things and do those really well, rather than go... every 5 minutes for a new idea that year. It keeps using the same kind of ideas over and over again. But the thing which really works for it is it's so grounded. When you're in there, it kind of works how you'd expect. So if you want to pick something up, it works how you expect. If you want to reload your guns, or you want to open a door or something, you literally just do it as if you would in real life. And I got to the point with it where I was playing along, and because you can only use your hands, obviously, because you've got hand controllers. Well, I wanted to shut a drawer, so I tried to kick it with my foot, and I realised I'd been suckered in by it so much. I expected that to work, and I was a bit upset when it didn't.
So many controllers attached to your feet now, so it will pick that up.
This is it. It's kind of crazy because, again, you've only got hands with a gun, and you can open a door, you can pull it up, you can grab all this stuff. If you've got your gun, there's a little hole in it, you can just poke the end of the gun in it and pull that back, and it all just works. Now, there's a number of times in that game where you have got kind of an inventory. You can only store like one item per hand. But once you've done that, you realise I could just pick something up if I wanted to. So the classic example I saw recently was a guy going like, oh, it's not fair, I can't carry all these grenades I keep finding. And somebody went, here's a milk crate you can pick up in-game. Just put the grenades in the milk crate and then carry the milk crate with you. Which was like, oh my God, that actually works. And so it was kind of fascinating, like, if you'd just thought a bit laterally, that's actually quite clever. But no, I'd highly recommend it to anyone. I know a lot of people are kind of upset because, they want to play next Half-Life, and they want to play it on a standard PC. But I don't think it'll work outside of VR. It's designed for VR, the way for you to interact with stuff and to move with stuff and, for you to be within that world. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame if you haven't got it, obviously, but I'd highly recommend, getting the kit to do so.
So which VR headset are you using?
So in my case, I've got an Oculus Quest, and I bought that at Christmas because I was kind of curious to see, what the state of the art was. And also because they'd said they were going to do the Oculus Link where you can effectively connect the headset to your PC and use as a PC headset. And it just works. It's kind of flawless. The technology is not quite there yet. I think it's still getting better. But, in terms of like a VR implementation which works, it's actually pretty well buttoned down. But the thing which I found interesting was I played it with Oculus Quest, which was Oculus Link, where it was connected to the PC. And there's a piece of software called Virtual Desktop. And if you install that, you can stream from your PC to your headset without any cables. And it works as well, if not better, than the official Oculus Link stuff. And what was fascinating is I kind of played through the whole game wired to the computer. Then I tried it again from the start wirelessly. And all of a sudden, not only can you interact by, moving around with the controllers and picking things up and doing stuff, but now you can actually just wander around. So, you're not wired to anything, so you can move. And it becomes so much easier to open doors and do things because you've got that freedom of movement than you would have done if you'd have been cabled up. So again, you can see it moving to a point where that might become more mainstream if you're not got to be connected up. But honestly, I highly recommend it. It's one of those things like it's hard to describe because you kind of got to try it, and it's not straightforward to just go and try it. I mean, it's the thing with VR, they're selling lots of headsets, but you can't walk into a shop and just try one on and see what it's like and get it. And I don't think it's ever going to take over from your PlayStation 5s, your Xbox One, Series X, and all the rest of it. It's just a different way of playing games. It's like going to see a movie in 3D rather than going to see a 2D movie. It's like just a different niche of games, basically.
Yeah, I think what blew me away was actually watching someone reloading the gun and actually doing all the movements of changing the clip. But not only that, I think we get lazy in first-person shooters. We hit the reload button at any point just because then we're prepared for whoever may appear around the corner. But if you look at the ammo numbers, it never actually takes more ammo than what is being replaced. But it would seem in Half-Life Alyx, if you're reloading a bit earlier, you lose the ammo that was in that clip.
You do, yeah. And it's quite clever because it teaches you to conserve it. I mean, the mad thing is the Half-Life, I would consider it like a sci-fi adventure, but Alyx is much more, it's almost survival horror, for want of a better phrase. You're always careful about the resources you've got. And reloading the gun, man. Number of times they ejected the clip, because what you have to do is eject the clip, you put the next clip in, but then you have to kind of cock the pistol as well. The number of times I forgot to cock the pistol and then I'm busily trying to shoot something. It's like, oh my God. So, you've got that to contend with as well. And then just trying to shoot something in VR as well. It's not like you get used to in, say, like you play Modern Duty, like Call of Duty or something like that, where it's easy to hit like a barn door in that because, it's got auto aim, it focuses for you. In this, you physically have to aim. And most of the time, what you find yourself doing is literally looking down the gun as if it was real life. So I won't say it's made me a crack shot. I very much suspect it probably hasn't, but it's more immersive and more realistic. And that's what I mean. It does those things really, really well. It might not, put you into the consoles, flying a spaceship or, all that kind of stuff. But the small things it gets, like opening a door and picking up a weapon and cocking a weapon, it just nails completely.
Presumably it's a bit of a game changer for VR, really, because VR's kind of been treading water, hasn't it?
Well, this is it. I mean, I think a lot of the time people look at VR and to make a game something like Half-Life, you've got to be somebody's got to fund you fairly well. And in Valve's case, they don't have to worry about pleasing some shareholders. They've decided they're going to make this thing and they've put the backs into it and made an absolutely brilliant game. But whether it's commercially viable, I just don't know.
Do we have to spend?
Well, who knows? It must have took them a while. I mean, I imagine they've been working on it for about 4 to 5 years, and it's probably cost them a lot of money. There's no two ways about it. I mean, that's the thing. I've played a lot of games on VR because I've got PlayStation VR as well. And where if you want something long and in depth, take something like Skyrim, for example, the VR version of that. It almost feels like you have to do an existing commercial game and add the VR to it in order to get that length and that depth you'd expect from your kind of traditional large adventure game, it's not something you can necessarily just develop yourself, unless, of course, something like say, Asgard's Wrath, where, you're bankrolled by someone like Facebook who want to put titles out there to kind of encourage people into the ecosystem. So, yeah, it's fascinating. Maybe this will be the last great big VR game. Who knows? Maybe this will set the market alight and people will flock to it in the droves. I'm not personally convinced they will, but let's wait and see.
Yeah, depends how many copies or how many people are playing it. I have a feeling that it might just open people's eyes a bit and actually start something from this, because you can see how they've done it and you can build on that.
Oh yeah, and again, like all kind of great games which are trailblazers, look at something like Mario 64 with camera controls and things like that. They've spent a lot of time on this, thinking about problems that people have. So, pulling clips out, the idea that you pull it from behind the back of your head and it must know the controller's got a certain thing. Really nice, smooth and easy mechanic. You can't imagine now playing a game where you'd have to drop into a menu and, pick what weapons it is you want to load out, and the rest of it is just smooth and simple.
Yeah.
So kudos to them for kind of optimizing that as well. It's quite clever.
Yeah. I wonder if it's like, when Doom came out, like they just solved those problems, didn't they? And then 6 months later, everyone was working on the Doom clone.
Yeah, totally.
Some more successful than others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But everyone,
you'll always get that where something is like a landmark title, but others feel they need to copy, to continue making money because they think, that's where the market's going. Everyone chases after it. But to me, it's always one of those things where they've kind of missed the point a little bit. It's that game is there and it's big, and you might try and copy it to emulate its success and hope you can get some portion of the market. But generally, what makes those things is they are innovative and they're different from stuff which is in the market at that time, and it just comes and takes people by surprise and blows them away.
Yeah. If you can surprise people, then you're onto a winner, aren't you?
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah, friends of mine were playing it, and they were saying they'd been on it like 4 or 5 hours or something like that, and then they came back out into real life, and they were actually trying to do the thing where you click and jump forward.
Yeah, totally. No, it's funny. It's like I always liken it to riding the bike down the motorway. Like when you come off the motorway, suddenly you've got to slow down and do 30 mile an hour again, and it's like, oh, it's just a mental adjustment. And again, coming out of VR is a little bit like that at times.
Yeah, I remember talking to a developer years ago who was involved with Train Simulator series. And he says, I remember driving along one day, looking up at the sky, thinking, oh, that's rendered beautifully.
Like Train Sim. It's like a guilty pleasure, Train Sim. I do like Train Sim.
Yeah, me too. I think there's a lot of people who do enjoy it, but probably not that necessarily that vocal about it, unfortunately.
Oh, man, no. The thing that I play a lot of and they find hilarious at work is American Truck Simulator or Euro Truck Simulator. And I think that's brilliant. It's calming, it's relaxing. You're driving your big lorry down the road, listening to the radio. And people go like, why do you play that? It's like, well, it's sort of like Elite, but I get to have a drive. Especially right now when I can't get out of the house. It's almost like an escape.
And the traffic is still as annoying.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, but you can just ram it off the road in Truck Simulator. You don't get done for that.
I think you get fined, don't you?
Well, you get a fine, but it's not like you get...
Okay, in real life, okay, you'd be pulled over, dragged to the floor and cuffed, but okay, yes, you just get a fine. But still, you're punished for it.
You are, well, yeah, but it depends how much money you've got,
So. Well, look at you, Mr. Snob.
No, because I have literally played it for hours, and and it's like a $50 fine or whatever it is in American Truck Simulator. You've got like millions in the bank. You're like, yeah, whatever.
It sounds like carnage on the roads of Steve Lycett.
Yeah, no, I mean, just as well I've never played the multiplayer version of it. It's best not. As all things, games are an escape.
So the PC Engine Mini then. So you say you've got one, but you haven't dared boot it up. Did you have that from like the original time it was released, or is that just something you purchased quite recently?
I always wanted one, and a long time ago, because I used to work in a game shop, some guy came in one day to sell one, and he wanted like 10 quid or something for it. He was just trying to get some money for some beer, some fags, God only knows what. And I bought it off him at a decent price. And I've always had the actual core system, the little white system. And it took me a long time to get one with a CD drive because, that was probably the first proper CD console, I'm going to say. But only obviously if you lived in Japan. And there's some just absolutely stunning games on it. There's stuff which is just as good now as it was back then. Stuff like, Castlevania kind of Rondo of Blood, Gradius kind of stuff. It's just great games. And I've had one, and when I was being lucky enough with work to go out to Tokyo, it was a good excuse for me to go and just go looking for games and stocking up, because the stuff out there it's crazy cheap, because to them it's just like, it's like us buying Atari 2600 cartridges in a charity shop, like the odd pound here and there. But over there you can kind of get pretty much anything you can think of in a game shop. Because this is one of the conversations I have to have at work occasionally, where in Japan, if you're looking for video games, you can go and find a specialist store which will sell video games across history, from right at the very start, kind of NES, even Famicom Disk System stuff. Whereas over here, we tend to think, once the generation's gone out of line or it's kind of finished, that's it. It just becomes super cheap, and then maybe in time, the kind of price and the value comes back to it. So one of the weird side effects with that is in Japan they don't really have nostalgia for old games, because you can just go back and buy that game if you want to do it. And one of the things when we used to talk to Sega, they'd be going like, well, why do you want this character? This character is old now. Why don't you just come up with something new? And I'm going like, in the rest of the world, people look at this stuff with nostalgia, and they don't have easy access to the kind of older games. And so for them, it's actually refreshing for, something they liked and they loved to come back and be in a modern game effectively. And it without like with the PC Engine. So, I was able to get a load of stuff and play it, but it is definitely getting creaky now. I worry about plugging it in and it not working and it dying. So when the Mini came out, and again, I ordered it from Amazon Japan. It's got every system, every kind of PC Engine represented. So it's not just the Hue cards. You've got the Super CD-ROMs. It does the arcade CD-ROMs. It does the Super Graphics, which is like literally there was like almost 4 generations of console on that console. It's like the Mega Drive. You get the 32X and the Mega CD. They basically came with peripherals. So as a way of getting a modern piece of kit, which has got all the kind of classic entries on there, from stuff which is the early stuff to the very latest arcade games for when the PC Engine kind of finished and stopped. It's a great thing. Just the one sad thing about it is it looks like if you plug it into a Raspberry Pi power supply, which pushes 2.5 amps in, it does something to it which breaks the controller. So you can watch the games, you can leave the attract mode on, but you can't actually play it because the controller doesn't work. Which I found out, the hard way. So it's going back, it is, which is it's a real shame because I'm really looking forward to playing it. And fingers crossed it gets replaced and I'll get one. And next time I'll plug it into something a bit lower amperage.
I've got one on order actually, the UK one.
So you got the core graphics. Well, I mean,
yeah.
It turns out that no matter what the outside looks like, the software and the components on the inside are exactly the same. So you're going to get the same thing. So when you get it, just be careful what you're plugging into, like an old mobile phone charger or the USB port on your TV or your laptop or something. Stay away from high amperage power supplies.
Good advice.
Valuable lesson.
Yeah. I made the mistake, so you don't have to.
Yeah. Interesting. So I don't actually know when that's going to come. I mean, it's sat there saying pre-order.
Well, you can, if you order from Amazon Japan, all of them are available from there now, and you pay about £15 extra to get it shipped from Tokyo.
Right.
And crazily, even in this kind of world of lockdown, mine came last week, just completely out of nowhere because I forgot I pre-ordered it. It just turned up and I was like, oh, I was expecting this to be like months in the future, not now.
Yeah.
But the UK ones from Amazon UK look like they're going to be back in the year, kind of Christmas time. So
really?
Yeah, really.
Well, that's bad. I'm kind of thinking next week.
Yeah. Well, wait and see. Maybe I'm wrong.
We'll have to get you on Amazon Japan.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I'll go have a look at that.
Yeah, it's cool. And if you go on Amazon Japan, they do have an English site now, so at least you understand what on earth you're buying. There's a lot of strange stuff which you need to speak the lingo for.
So when we're talking about all this retro nostalgia, if there's one system you'd want to go and buy right now, what would it be?
Well, for me, it was the PC Engine. It's a fairly...
And he broke it.
That's why I'm good to that. Well, I broke it. I plugged it in and it killed it kind of thing. So, no, it's been probably my favourite console of all time. This NES is up there as well. The Spectrum Next, obviously, I've ordered one because I remember the Spectrum and all the rest of it. I don't know. I kind of flit about because I've always been into emulation. So it's good to get, like Amiga emulation and play some of the stuff I used to really enjoy playing. So... I don't know. I think the PC Engine was the one I was kind of looking forward to, just to have something which was accurate, effectively.
And does the fact it's emulation rather than the real thing ever bother you?
Oh, well, not really, because I know there's a certain amount of people who say they always like to play on original hardware. And, you probably do get a more authentic experience. But, a lot of the time, buying that kit is just not practical or, viable from a cost point of view. And I'm reasonably technical, but I wouldn't say I want to open something up and start changing capacitors. And for me, emulation means I can buy something which I trust is going to work and not kind of explode. I'm looking forward actually to, I think the analog consoles, they're making a pocket console, and that's FPGA based rather than emulation per se. And that, I find that kind of exciting. I think that will probably be the next thing where it's as close as you can get to original hardware, but still with the modern leanings of being able to plug it into a current TV and something like that. So, I think that's the way it's going. And certainly that's the way the Spectrum Next is. It's FPGA. So you're basically, it's hardware level emulation. It's not emulation, is it? I don't know what you call it.
It's doing its best to represent the cycles.
Yeah, and even now I know there are cases even with the Next where it's not super accurate if you're pushing it through HDMI. For example, the display timers in HDMI are different to the kind of original Spectrum timers. So there's things you could do on original Spectrum you can't do on the Next if you're using HDMI, unless you plug it through VGA or something else. Which I find fascinating, the fact that we can't you can't even get it to work perfectly even now, many years later. But that, to me, like I say, it's one of those things that I like it in the same way like I used to like mobile phones. You buy a new phone and you get a feature on it. I bought that weird brick-shaped Nokia with keyboard on either side of the screen. And that was a brilliant phone because it had an MP3 player in it with 64 megabytes. Can you imagine that? I could get about 10 tracks on it. And mobile phones were interesting because every time you buy a new one, you get a new feature. Like this one's got a camera on it. This one's got polyphonic audio. This one, you can create your own custom music and stuff like that. And phones now, I don't want to say they've got boring because they've become ubiquitous. They do everything. Any modern mobile phone you'll buy will do the same as any other modern mobile phone. You've got maps, cameras, and contacts, and even you can talk to people on it as well, apparently. But it's become boring in a way. You don't get excited about buying a new phone these days. But it used to be like a new phone would come along and it would be something spectacular because, look, you can do this now. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
It's kind of over for phones, isn't it? It's like 10 years of interesting stuff, and it's kind of peaked now. It's kind of honing itself into a polished final product, isn't it?
Well, it's homogenous, isn't it? And this is again not to be mean. I'm excited by the new consoles, but they both are x86 based. They both got decent GPUs and millions of teraflops of performance and all the rest of it. But there's like the Switch. The Switch is interesting because you could use it as a handheld console, or you could use it as a TV console. That's for me, that's the most interesting console in a long time because you've got these two completely different modes. Where I look at what. I know I'll get into trouble for this. Look at what Microsoft and Sony are doing next, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, it's great, but it's just more of the same with more horsepower. We'll be able to do something new with it, but where's the craziness? Where's the madness of the cell processor, or where's the just complete bonkers natures of this one does HT or online or whatever it turns out to be?
I can't believe you dare bring up the PS3 cell processor. As a developer, as notorious as it was and difficult to program for.
Oh, it's a nightmare. It was just a nightmare. But the brilliant thing about it is once you got used to it and once you got into writing for it, you discovered there were things you could do on that, which are, at the time, just elevated it past something else. It's the first time probably a lot of programmers got used to doing kind of multi-threaded stuff. simply because if you wanted to get the best performance out of it, you had to really understand how the goddamn thing worked. So, yeah, but it was interesting. That's my point. It was interesting, not just, more of the same.
The battle was fun to get. And I guess that brings us back to the retro stuff, because you had to battle to get sometimes the most basic function to appear. And maybe that, as for a developer, was in itself half the appeal. Maybe there's so much power now, and there's so many people, I'd imagine, involved making a game compared to how it was back then. You've probably got hundreds of people working on a title, from the various aspects, the graphics, the audio, the gameplay mechanics, the story. The teams must be so much larger, so much money being thrown around to make these AAA titles. But back in, you go rewind 30 years, the biggest challenge was, and you're looking at something like the Sega Mega Drive, okay, how can we add another layer in the background?
And again, people would use the hardware there, and the game would be made by about 4 or 5 people in that kind of era. But it's weird. Yeah, like you're right now. I mean, when we did finish Crackdown, at its peak, there must have been well over 200 people working on that. And that was a complicated beast to do. So, it's mad. And with that, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure you communicate to people what it is they should be doing, and make sure everyone knows what the expectations are. Constantly going, it's this, keep doing, stop doing that. That's mad. Don't do that.
So how about you, Tony, when we're talking about sort of the retro machines, and you've been programming on lots of the ones from the past in particular, which is the one that holds a special place in your heart?
It's a good question, really. I mean, I kind of like them all in some ways. I buy these things on eBay. I'm always looking for good examples of even stuff that I never had, I never had a Dragon 32, so I'm kind of looking out for one of those. But what interests me is just the idea that these things can come back to life. So the next is good because it's not just the original machine. It's kind of brought up to date in that it connects to a monitor, and it's got proper storage on it, so you can an SD card and all that. So suddenly it brings it back to life in a way that's sustainable. So I mean, I'd like to see the same thing on all of these old machines. I'd love an Amstrad CPC doing the same kind of thing, where you can plug it in and you can store things properly. And a Commodore 64 done the same way. Maybe there is a 64. Is there a 64 that does the same sort of thing?
There's the 64 Mini, which I think is probably as close as you're going to get.
Yeah, and
with a proper keyboard on it and all the rest of it. So,
can you program it though? Can you get into it?
I should imagine so. I mean, if it's what I'm thinking of, I think you can still. It still has BASIC on there. You can probably connect an assembler to it and pipe stuff through. So, it's out there. So people are doing it.
You're right. Well, that sounds quite interesting. I mean, that's what I like the idea of. You bring these things back to life and then keep them going. Maybe an Enterprise 64. Get a nice one of those working again. That would be great.
Well, I mean, there is like I think for all these older computers, kind of retro stuff, there's still a scene of people still making hardware for these things, so they can transmit stuff to it, or you can load stuff from an SD card. And that to me is kind of fascinating, that there's still an allure there for people to do that stuff and want to work with old hardware, almost like go back to basics in a way, but with a few modern kind of blessings, so you don't have to worry about the microdrives eating your software or whatever it turns out to be.
Exactly. But it'd be good if it was mainstream as well. Not the easier it is, the more accessible it is, the more people get into it and actually buy them. I mean, I want to see these games as completely legitimate and as ubiquitous as the modern stuff. As the AAA consoles. Wouldn't it be great if the Spectrum game could be up there in the charts?
Like to bring it all back, yeah.
Because the creativity can be there. People can focus on, if you want to write a game, you don't need to go work for Ubisoft in Canada. You can get together with your mates and do something, and it could change the industry, because if there's the sales, if there's the players, then it in a legitimate market, then the scene becomes legitimate, and people will be attracted to it as developers and players. And there's no reason why not. I think there's the interest there. So if the hardware matches it and the marketing matches it, then it could bubble up and be a real big thing. That's what I'd like to see.
And again, I'm obviously still waiting for my next, but all the stuff I've seen of it, it makes it look like it's commercially, of that kind of level of quality. If you could find someone who's willing to take it on in a store and promote it, WH Smith's maybe, who knows? But something like that where, you can literally walk into a shop and buy one, and it would become a bit more legitimate.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that just be brilliant?
Oh, yeah. And again, it's sort of, it's bringing back the industry back to its roots effectively. A lot of people bought these things and developed stuff at home in the UK, and it built as a fairly decent software developers. It was like a training ground for a lot of people who still make games today. So, yeah, it'd be nice to go back a bit.
And at university, you can do your game programming course on a Spectrum Next, and rather than bloody Unity,
Well, yeah, and for me again, like sometimes I occasionally have a chat at work with designers that that they'll have restrictions, and restrictions force you to be creative. You can have as much memory as you like in the world and as much processing power and all the rest of it. But even with modern consoles, there's still restrictions of what you can do. Whether it's just how much is loaded in one time, or the expectations of being able to jump from one thing to another. And it's a thing which a lot of younger software developers don't necessarily get because they've not grown up with it effectively. Where you've got to curb your ambitions based on what it is you're doing. So you've either got to be clever about it and present it in a different way than you'd expect, or you try and go all out and you fail. That's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they should start on Pico 8 or something.
Totally.
That'll teach you about making decisions about limited resources.
Yeah, you can have a starfield or you can have spaceships. You can't have both. Take your pick.
Unless you're clever.
Unless you can multiplex it, yeah.
In fact, a lot of the videos I've been watching recently, so I think it's a channel called Game Hut, and it's someone who's been working on, he was a developer on things like Sonic R. And that was a game, it doesn't particularly appeal to me in the past, the idea of Sonic running rather than actually being in a vehicle. Didn't exactly make any sense to me. But anyway, maybe people think the reverse plane transformed. I don't know. But anyway, that's another conversation. But the point is, he goes into some of the technical challenge. And of course, Sonic R was on the Sega Saturn, which was a beast of a console in its own right, with the way that was split up with two sort of CPUs, a master and a slave, and then the two, what was it, the VDP units, or what was it?
Oh, God, yeah. That was a multi-CPU console. That you're talking about the John Burton series, aren't you?
I'm not sure. But he's obviously a very clever guy. He's really good with the mathematics, and I must admit, when he's explaining the more in-depth technical stuff, I'm like going, whoa. But still, it's a fantastic channel to watch, and he gives away these little coding secrets, like how he got so many colours into a still of an image when it was meant to be limited to far less colours, and all these little things that add up to make it a very special game. How did he get the intro video working on the Sega Mega Drive and things like that? It was just like really fun to watch. Yeah. But the technical nous you had to have to accomplish these things was just ridiculous. I mean, we take things so for granted now. If you want a video introduction, you create a video and on it goes. There's still a lot of hard work. The levels of expectations for quality are higher than ever, but still, to actually create the video and get it on a disc, that's the easy part. It's just the actual sort of thinking of the story plot and etc. etc. It's not the actual sort of technical requirement around it anymore. And I find it always fun watching those. And the real irony is, got an Xbox One X downstairs connected to an OLED, and I've been playing Doom Eternal, which is just an insanely amazing, stupendous first-person shooter which brings back all the excitement of the original Doom easily. It's got its minuses here and there. I don't like the jumping mechanic where I'm hopping from a wall and grabbing on. I don't get that at all. I think it's just trying to add a new puzzle element, which is I'm finding quite dull, but the rest of it is just spectacular. But then I'll go from that, and then I'll jump to my Raspberry Pi 3 with RetroPie on it and play just as long with just so much happiness still in my heart.
And that's the thing, isn't it? You know, if something is compelling, it's still compelling now, as compelling as it was back in the day. And there's a lot of software, let's be honest, there's a lot of software which hasn't stood up to the test of time, but there's a hell of a lot which has. You know, something like, I want to say Super Mario Brothers 3. I remember getting that on the NES years and years back, and I'd still quite happily play that today. It's tight, it's fair. it doesn't screw you over like some of the early arcade machines do. And it's as good today as it was back then. And there's like a timelessness to certain software, and I like that. To me, it's no different than looking at a classic film or watching. I watched the Laurel and Hardy movie with Steve Coogan the other day, and I thought, actually, I'd still happily watch Laurel and Hardy today. It's still entertaining. There's none other. It might not be at a modern standard, where you expect certain things, but there was like an innocence to it in some ways, and that in itself is refreshing.
They had some good.
So, we've got next generation consoles just around the corner. I'm not going to go too deep into Steve because I don't want to get into any trouble. But I think, what's the one thing you're looking forward to? I mean, like you say, a lot of it is just there's a lot more horsepower. But what's the one thing that, as a developer, you think, yeah, this is one thing I'm looking forward to implement?
Well, I mean, all I've got to go on is stuff that I've seen on the internet, to be honest, because I've yet to get one of these kits on my desk and really give it a bit of a poking. But the interesting thing, that I think everyone expects that more bigger horsepower. So it's got better CPUs, got better GPUs, and the rest of it. But for me, one of the interesting things is the fact all these come with like new super fast SSDs. So effectively, what you're doing with that is you're kind of getting rid of loading time. At least that's my understanding of it. So, regular now, you'll play a game, and even with Crackdown, you get killed. We'd have to reload the level, put you back in, reset all the variables and all the rest of it. And at times that could take, 15, 20, 30 seconds. Where with these SSDs now, you can load that stuff in so much quicker. And so hopefully loading times, it'll never become a thing of the past, but it'll be something which you look back on and go, Jesus, we used to put up with this. How have we ever managed to get rid of it? And so now it should be that much quicker. So
it's going to be like playing games with a cartridge, you mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, ironically, yeah. I mean, it's moved in that direction. If you've seen the demonstration, I think Sony did it with Spider-Man. They showed you the PS4 version, and the load times were like, luckily, 30, 40 seconds. And they said, here this is on the PS5 using the SSD. And it was like 1 or 2 seconds. It was so quick that you didn't have time to see it to load. It's one of the problems we used to have with PC games, because we'd do a console game and you'd have to load stuff off a CD or DVD. And it'd take a while to get back into level. And on PC, so I transformed had a fruit machine on the loading screen just to keep you occupied. So you could press a button, spend some coins, and you had something to do while the game loaded. And on PC, we had to artificially extend the loading time so we had time to use the fruit machine.
Oh, man.
So it's, I don't know, I think that's going to be something that people don't necessarily realize at first, but will come to like and quite really, really like after the while.
It's funny how we're talking about these things. So you've mentioned loading time, so which is very much like having a cartridge. And it was probably one of the reasons the N64 stuck with cartridge where everyone else was moving to CD. And you're looking puzzled, Steve.
Well, I don't think the N64 stayed with cartridge because they wanted to have that quick loading time. I think that was more of a Nintendo thing where they were worried because they had been hit with piracy and bits and pieces that if they moved to disc that people would pirate stuff. I think there was more that, and he was used to. Those guys were used to basically having their own way and their own say, and they were used to being able to say, well, if you're going to pay this much money, we're going to make so much money out of it. So I don't think it was a choice to keep the loading time down. In fact, there's some N64 games where there's loading time, which is always fascinating me. They had to decompress stuff from the cartridge. It's like, what? So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, James, maybe bad example. But I guess one of the things I'm looking for, and it's something a lot of games in the day tried to achieve and often did, 60 frames per second. So I want to now see every game minimum 60 frames per second.
That'd be great, wouldn't it? I'm a big proponent of 60 frames a second. I think it just feels better. Unfortunately, again, we've done stuff where I wanted to do it 60 and we were pushed into doing it 30 because there's a certain expectation of graphical quality. And you go, but 60? And they go, no, but it's got to look great. And you're like, well, you can't have both.
Doom Eternal.
Yep.
Doom Eternal.
These new machines, they will be 60, won't it? Isn't that the point of them?
Well, you think, I mean, again, for me, that's what you would take from it. But there's always, you've got to bear in mind, and this was true of PlayStation and Xbox One, that the hardware, if they stuck to 720, you would have been easily capable of 60 frames a second. But of course, as well as the increase in console stuff, the TVs were getting better. So suddenly you've got 4K TVs and you've got 4 times the amount of pixels you've got to draw. So yes, your hardware's taking a step up, but you've also got to render that 4 times more. So you're back to basically where you started. That's why it's always like Jeff Minter. They keep stuff visually simple and they come in at 120 frames a second. So
that's why it annoys me now they're talking about 8K.
Well, and again, if you go from 4K to 8K, you're going up by a factor of 4 yet again. So yes, you've got faster GPUs and you've got faster CPUs, but you're going to eat so much of that on a bigger screen.
We might be able to play Lemmings
need
at
8K
8K
screens?
No,
I don't think we need 8K screens.
Unless we've got a front room bigger than the Trump Tower or something, I think we'll be okay with 4K.
Yeah, totally.
So, Tony, while we've been doing this podcast, have you thought about the one project that's going to revolutionise our fortunes in the retro space with your Spectrum Next? No pressure.
I guess I'm thinking the little game I'm working on, which I've been working on for ages, and I'm doing for PC and all that, and iOS. I guess I'm hoping maybe one day I'll figure out, I'll put that and get that on the Next. That'll be the most logical thing for me to do. It would work, I think. I mean, I'm doing it in Game Maker, which is some funny, strange language they cobbled up themselves. So, but once I've written it and that, it'd be pretty easy to port it back into C or something like that. That'd be quite nice. I think that's probably what I'll do, because it is a retro game. It just does a lot. It just does a lot of things that modern games do in a retro type setting. So it's like the whole point of the project is it's like me now, having worked in the games industry for 30 years or something, just going back in time and applying everything I know and carrying on from where we left off on the 8-bit days. So I think this project I think it would run fine on the Next. So I mean, yeah, that'll be the logical thing for me to do. So yeah, I've decided that during this call.
There you go. Perfect. If we've achieved anything during this podcast, I'll be happy. It's that.
I've made the decision on a Sunday in the lockdown. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
Well, I think with a lockdown, that does help you make decisions because you have no choice but to think about these things.
It's not like you might get distracted by the boozer, is it?
I can see this has hit you hard, Steve.
I'll be honest with you, it's one of those things that I never thought I was that outgoing and wanted to be outside quite so much. My hobbies include motorbikes and beer, and the fact that I can't go on the bike to the coast on a day like today, or I can't go to the pub and go and sit and have a beer in the beer garden on a day like today is hitting me quite hard. I'm sure I'll get used to it.
Well, I hope we've provided a pleasant distraction when you sat there in your pajamas.
Oh, totally, no. It's been. I am literally in my pajamas. But no, it's been great to have a chat, and it has taken my mind off it. But I know the second I take the headset off and I look out the window, I'm like, oh man.
We'll have to record episode 3 in a few hours. Well, guys, we've been recording for about an hour now, so thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure to have you both. Tony, we'll no doubt be talking again on episode 3, and hopefully with a little bit more details behind your project. Maybe we can have a sneaky concept art session or something. No pressure again. Thanks, Steve, for taking part. I hope all the lockdown eases for you soon so you can get a nice swift pint at your local and get on the old motorbike.
Totally. It's been great.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.